About 300,000 children have fled Lebanon to Syria in the last 7 weeks due to the worsening conflict with Israel, the NGO Save the Children said in a statement. Many children travel alone, separated from their parents or families, are at risk of abuse, illness, and suffer from food shortages as winter looms. It is estimated that 70% of those displaced from Lebanon to Syria are Syrian, while the rest are Lebanese or of other nationalities. The United Nations estimates that about 60% are children and adolescents, many of whom are in desperate need of medical care, shelter, food, and water. At least 1.2 million people in Lebanon, a fifth of the total population, have been displaced since the violence escalated, including many of the Syrian refugees, about 1.5 million in total, who have found refuge in Lebanon since the beginning of the conflict in their country 13 years ago. According to Save the Children, more than 72% of the population in Syria, or about 16.7 million people, is in need of assistance, the highest number since the beginning of the crisis in 2011. IDF, new evacuation notice for civilians in Southern Beirut. The IDF has issued a new evacuation notice for Lebanese civilians in the vicinity of 6 buildings in the southern suburbs of Beirut, ahead of airstrikes against Hezbollah facilities. The Army's Arabic language spokesman published maps of the areas that will be hit on social media, urging civilians to keep at least 500 meters away. Netanyahu on trial for corruption. He cannot testify because he is busy with the war. Amit Haddad, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's defense lawyer in the corruption trial, said at a hearing at the Jerusalem District Court that the Prime Minister is unable to adequately prepare for the testimony on December 2nd, the date set by the court, because during the current war, he has put the country's needs before his personal legal interests. Netanyahu is running the whole war, and there are weeks when we can't meet him. How can this be ignored? Asks Haddad, adding, "Don't we want a prime minister whose head is entirely in the management of the war?" This was reported by the Times of Israel. Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State, it's time to end the war in Gaza. Israel has achieved the military objectives it had set itself against the Palestinian militias of Hamas, and the time has come to end the conflict. This was declared by the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. Israel has achieved the strategic objectives it had set for itself. He was rightly determined to do his best to ensure that October 7th could never happen again. To do so, he wanted to dismantle the Hamas military organization and strike at the leadership responsible for October 7. He did both, so this should be the time to end the war, Blinken concluded. 3 siblings, under the age of 6, killed in a raid in Jabalia. Palestinian doctors say that an attack by the Israeli army, IDF, on a house in northern Gaza killed 3 brothers under the age of 6. The emergency service of the Gaza Ministry of Health says that the 3 children were killed in an attack on a house near a clinic in the urban refugee camp of Jabalia, where Israel has been conducting an offensive for over a month. The children were among the victims of 6 people killed in Israeli attacks in the war-torn territory. Raid on pro-Iranian group in Syria after attack on U.S. forces, 5 dead. U.S. forces conducted raids against targets linked to a pro-Iranian group in Syria in response to a rocket attack on U.S. forces in the country. The news was reported by CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights spoke of 5 pro-Iranian fighters killed and others wounded after American fighters targeted a base in the town of Al-Bukamal in the eastern Syrian province of Deir ez-Zor. The strikes targeted the group's weapons, logistics, and storage headquarters facility in response to a missile attack on U.S. personnel, CENTCOM said. There was no damage to U.S. facilities or injuries among U.S. forces or partners during the attack, CENTCOM added. The U.S. military has about 900 troops in Syria and 20,500 in Iraq, as part of the international coalition established in 2014 to counter the jihadist group of the Islamic State. Since the war broke out in the Gaza Strip, pro-Iranian groups have repeatedly targeted U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria in response to Washington's support for Israel. On several occasions, the United States has responded to these attacks by targeting Iranian-backed groups. Hezbollah commanders killed in a raid in Lebanon. Several Hezbollah commanders have been killed in recent airstrikes in southern Lebanon. This was stated by the Israeli army in a statement. According to the IDF, in early October, a fighter-led attack killed Mohammed Musa Salah, identified as the commander of Hezbollah forces in the Qiyam region of southern Lebanon. According to the military, Salah was responsible for more than 2,500 rocket launches on the Golan Heights, the Upper Galilee, and the Galilee Panhandle during the war, as well as attacks on IDF troops in southern Lebanon. U.S. attacks against militias in Syria, 9 dead. Attacks by American forces against targets linked to an Iranian-backed militia in Syria in response to a missile attack on Washington's troops. This was announced by the U.S. military. The attacks targeted the weapons depot and the structure of the logistics headquarters in response to a missile attack on U.S. personnel, the U.S. Central Command said in a social media post. The U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, did not mention the name of the militia in the post, but explained that there was no damage to U.S. facilities and no injuries to U.S. or partner forces during the attack. The previous day, U.S. forces bombed 9 targets associated with Iranian-backed groups in response to recent drone and rocket attacks, according to the Pentagon. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, a monitoring group, said Monday's attacks killed 4 members of groups loyal to Iran.